Hey everyone, it's Brittany with Aimpoint, and we are back. We have Larry Vickers joining us today. Larry, thanks for coming on.
You're welcome.
Larry has been a friend of Aimpoint for a long time Aimpoint user. In fact, I believe the first site that Larry used was when he was in Delta, and it was an Aimpoint 2000, one of our older models. Um,
Yes.
okay, Larry, how about you bring us up to speed? Tell us a little bit more about yourself, your background, and what you're doing today.
Well, I spent a career almost 21 years in the Army, pretty much all of it in special operations, other than my initial basic training and whatnot. I was in the Green Berets initially, then tried out for Delta, made Delta, and I made Delta Force, and I finished my last 15 years of my career in Delta, and actually went back to Delta and was a contract instructor for a period of time. Been heavily involved in the firearms industry now for many, many years, as you know. That's where I met you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Aimpoint's been a brand that's been real special to me for many years because it was my introduction to red dot sights when I got in Delta Force. It was Aimpoint 2000, and to this day, great piece of kit. And I'd have no hesitation today to put an Aimpoint 2000 on a weapon of mine and defend myself or my family with it. I mean, we're talking about many years after the fact, and also many evolutions of Aimpoint products. So kind of been a fan of the brand from back then, the ruggedness and simplicity, and very heavily involved in the firearms industry now. Got a lot of stuff going on. Firearms industry consulting, a YouTube channel, which Aimpoint, thank you very much, as a sponsor. Um, like I said, training. I got a line of coffee table books, Vickers guide books. I have a variety of accessories that have the Vickers or Vickers Tactical name attached to them within the industry, with Wilson Combat, affiliated with Blue Force Gear, of course, as you well know, Bravo Company USA, Tango Down. I've got a really good core of companies and friends, and Aimpoint is certainly on that list, that I've been dealing with for years, and I have no intention of changing anytime soon.
Great, great. Well, we consider you a great friend as well. So,
I greatly appreciate it.
so guys, if you've been following us, you know that we've been asking for your questions. So we've got some questions for you, Larry.
Mm-hmm.
First one is easy, simple one. So this comes from Bryce, and Bryce says, Larry, I'm a new shooter, and I just bought my first AR. Which Aimpoint sight should I get?
Well, if you've got the budget, the top of the line, in my opinion, is the Aimpoint Micro T2. By that, to me, is the flagship of the line. All the Comp M4, Comp M5, all that stuff are great pieces of kit. I consider the Micro T2 kind of the flagship. Now, if it's one of those things where, you know what, I just bought my first AR, I kind of want to ease my way into this, I kind of want to really be looking at the bottom line, price wise, without a doubt, the Aimpoint Pro, the patrol rifle optic. That is the best bang for the buck in the red dot sight arena in the entire market. So that's why I tell people, you're looking for the best bang for your buck, Aimpoint Pro. Outstanding piece of kit, especially for the price. Superb.
Mm-hmm. We did a video, or you guys did a video years ago with the famous patrol rifle optic that was in that house fire. So you were the
Yes,
one that was able to pry open the lid, put it on a AR, and see if it held zero.
that's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It still held zero.
Mhm.
Yep,
Yeah, that's a neat
absolutely.
story.
Yeah, it is.
If you guys don't know what we're talking about, there was an article, a recoil article years ago. This patrol rifle optic was in a house fire, and basically the rifle didn't survive, but the optic did. And not only did the optic survive, it was kind of all um, just covered in ash, and it had actually been sitting in snow for a month or so. Um, it was still on, and it held zero. So.
Yep. Yeah, we put it on. We were able to engage targets with it and whatnot. Just a testimony to the ruggedness of Aimpoint. The legendary brand within the firearms industry for ruggedness and reliability. Legendary brand.
Okay, so next question. This is from Darren. He asked this on Instagram. He says, I read several different ways to do this. What is your zeroing procedure?
Okay, I assume you're talking about a carbine. The zeroing procedure I use is one I used back in Delta, or we used back in Delta, and I've used it ever since. It's a real simple zeroing procedure. Put up a bullseye at 25 yards. You're going to aim for the X. Go back to 25 yards, get the most stable position you can, whether prone or on a bench. Shoot 5 shots. Now, if it turns out for whatever reason, the aim point, your dot, or the group is not on the target at all, then go up to 10 or 15 yards so you can figure out where it's at and adjust to get it on the paper. So when you go back to 25, you know you have a group on the bullseye. And then you want to adjust that following Aimpoint's directions to where your group is 2 inches below the X. All right. This is a good rule of thumb, really, kind of regardless if you're using an AR or an AK or whatever rifle you're using, 2 inches below the X. Ideally, a 5-shot group that you can cover with a quarter. All right. Because that's going to get you in the ballpark of 1 inch at 25 yards. Understand something with an Aimpoint now. They're half MOA clicks at 100. So you got to divide that by 4 when you're at 25. So what that means is each click is 1/8 of an inch. So 8 clicks will move you 1 inch at 25. Then you go back to your actual distance that you're going to zero the gun. 50 yards, 100 yards, and there's pros and cons for all of it. If it's a self-defense weapon, something you're going to use for home defense, I tell people zero it at the maximum legally justified distance for your home defense scenario. What zeroing there means is real simple. My bullet hits where my red dot is. It's that simple. The 2 inches below at 25 gets you in the ballpark. So when you go back to 50 or 100, hopefully when you shoot that 5-shot group, you're somewhere on the paper or the cardboard, hopefully, and then you can zero it from there. Remember, when you go back to 50, each click's 1/4 inch, right? You got to remember, you got to remember how things are working at the yard line that you're working it at. And if you go back to 100, each click is a 1/2 inch. So just adjust it from there. What's the ideal group size at 50 would be 2 inches. The ideal group size at 100 that I use as a good rule of thumb is 4 inches. Now, most ARs will shoot better than that, but you got to factor in the ammo, the gun itself, also the shooter's skill. If you can shoot a 4-inch 5-shot group with your Aimpoint optic on top of your AR, you're doing your job. So my zeroing procedure, real simple to recap: 25 yards, most stable position you can get in. You want a group, ideally a group, 5 shots that you can cover with a quarter. Adjust it to where it's 2 inches below your point of aim at 25, and then go back to your actual distance, 50, 100, or whatever, and finalize that zero. So your point of aim, point of impact, the bullet is impacting where your red dot is. Use that zero for many years. It's exactly the same zero I teach in my carbine classes, and works like a champ.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Next, let's see. Next question is, where do you place your sight on a rifle with a continuous rail, and why?
Here's what I'm assuming they're talking about a 5.56 AR.
Mm-hmm.
I center it over the ejection port, right above the ejection port. And here's why. It's a real simple concept. If you have the aim point farther back, you have a better field of view through the aim point and less field of view around the aim point. If you have the aim point farther forward, let's say you have a continuous rail, monolithic rail, and you put it kind of out on the handguard, you've got much more field of view around the aim point and less field of view through. What's a good compromise on the amount of field of view through the optic and amount around it is right over, centered over the ejection port. I've taught that for years, and I've used it, and it works great. It's a real good compromise between the two, and that's what I recommend.
Okay. Okay, next question. This is from John, and he asked this through Facebook. He says, are there any advantages to direct milling? So we're going to switch to a pistol question now. Direct milling versus a plate when mounting an Aimpoint Acro.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Understand the manufacturers do this mount plating interface in order to, there's no industry standard on the different red dot sights out there in terms of mounting them to a pistol. There's no industry, there's nothing even close to an industry standard. I would argue, excuse me, I would argue without a doubt the way the acro mounts is the best. It's kind of like I tell people it's like a little miniature Picatinny rail, and it has a recoil lug, but it's a proprietary, like almost all of them are. And so from a manufacturer's point of view, you have no idea what the end user is going to mount on it, or if he's going to switch optics, right? So you
Mm-hmm.
have to come up with this kind of universal interface system and either sell them, or they come in with the box in many cases, in most cases, or in some cases you find out what you want and then you get it from the manufacturer or whatnot. So that forces you in a less than ideal situation, because inevitably what happens is that interface mount is mounted to the gun and it's bolted in, right? It's screwed in. And then I put the optic on it and it's in some form or fashion screwed in or clamped in with the acro. So now you've got another level of screws involved in the situation that really don't need to be there. Direct milling, without a doubt, is the way to go. And here's what I'll tell you. There's some guns that are easier to do that with than others. A Glock is a good example. It's got plenty of material where you can machine the slide and mount an acro. You can do it on other guns, but you got to go to a place that really knows what they're doing. I use ATEI in Michigan. Once again, ATEI is who I use. They do a fantastic job, and they offer it on a variety of optics, and also a variety of pistols. And they will work on getting it as low as possible. I've had them do acro on an HKVP9. They've done an acro for me on a P320, SIG P320. And they do a really good job up there of figuring out the depth it needs to be to optimize the mounting, but also making sure all the safeties and everything work properly in the slide. So direct milling is definitely the way to go, beyond a shadow of a doubt. You want to go with somebody reputable. And understand you're going to need to get the slide refinished, which is no big deal. But understand, of course, you're married to that optic, or at least that type of optic, right? Once
Mm-hmm.
you do that. But without a doubt, I'm a fan of direct milling. And I'm also a fan of now is trying to get the optic low enough where I can use standard height pistol sights in the bottom of the field of view. It's just personal preference. I'm not a fan. I'm just kind of over the big suppressor height sights, because they almost look like a shark fin on the gun now. And that's personal preference. I'm kind of over those. I like it if the optic's low enough where I can use regular height sights in the bottom field of view, but that's not always the case. Some red dot sights on certain pistols, you can't do that. You have to use suppressor height sights.
Okay, that's actually a great segue, because the next question is, I've heard some instructors say that iron sights are no longer necessary with a quality with a quality pistol mounted optic. What's your opinion?
I'm old school. I always like to have on my carbines, my pistols, just backup iron sights. I always like to have them. I prefer to have them in the bottom third field of view, right? Whether I'm running my micro T2, or I'm running an Aimpoint Pro, or whatever Aimpoint I got on my various long guns, or I'm running an acro, I prefer the irons in the bottom third field of view if at all possible. So they're there in case something happens. Now you talk about, well, what if the sight fails? Yeah, I mean, aim points are very rugged now, but they're still man-made mechanical device, so you could have a failure. It's unlikely, it's pretty rare, but here's the real issue that a lot of people don't take into account is they have the brightness setting less than ideal for the situation they're in. For instance, they dim the brightness setting down for a particular lighting environment, and then they step out into a lighting environment where it's too dim for the situation, and now they're having to search for the dot to try to see it. At least there's iron sights there that you can pick up on. Another thing that works in your favor too, and we talked about this before, Brittany, is kind of the tube effect that the acro has. And kind of having that front sight out there doesn't really hurt in terms of when you're bringing the gun up. Kind of seeing that front sight subconsciously, at least, allows you to kind of help guide the front of the pistol into the target. So it's almost like a backup presentation aid in that regard, particularly the front sight itself. So yeah, I'm a fan of keeping, like I said, I'm old school. I'm a fan of keeping backup pistol sights or backup iron sights if it's a aim point on a rifle or aim point on a pistol. Here's what I will tell you though. Make sure it's a sight setup that is not going to confuse things for you. Remember, your primary sighting situation with that pistol is a red dot sight. So I don't know that I would really want like a red or orange high definition front sight. You know what I mean? That when you come up, your eyes are kind of like, well, what do I look at the HD front sight or do I look at the dot? You don't want that. You want to make sure the dot is the most prominent thing and have the backup irons, but also try to have the backup irons where they're usable, hopefully in different lighting conditions. A great way that a lot of people go that I've used in the past is a green fiber optic front, and it's great because if I have to use it, it's there. But it's a different color than the red dot sight. Of course, the issue there is it's not very usable in low light conditions. So you want to put a little bit of thought into the type of front sight, not really the rear sight. I leave my rear sights on pistols black now. I just leave them plain. I haven't put tritium or anything on them in quite a while. But the front sight, put some thought into what you have on the front sight. So hopefully it's usable in low light conditions, but the dot is going to be definitely the most prominent thing in your sight picture. Could be for some people just a simple tritium dot will work during the day. It really doesn't distract you, but at night, if something happens, you have a front tritium dot that you can see.
Okay. Okay. Great. I hadn't thought about the color of the dot, so yeah, that's good.
I've
Good
had
advice.
that happen to me. That's why I bring it up, because I had that happen to me. I had a red front sight and a red dot, and I was coming up, and subconsciously your brain's got, what do I look at? And I went, oh man, this lesson learned.
Okay. All righty. Next question. I guess this is a little bit more back on the rifle side. What are the range limitations of a red dot sight in distance shooting? I guess you could answer
Good,
that for rifle or pistol, both, either one.
good question. Remember, like micro T2, 2-minute dot. So it's 2 inches at 100, 4 inches at 200, 6 inches at 300 and whatnot. The range limitations, there really isn't any. I mean, you remember we went out to gun sight, and me and my buddy Walt Wilkinson, we had an Aimpoint challenge, and I was able to hit man-sized targets, man-sized steel targets out to 600 with my 5.56
Not
Bravo
magnified?
pump. Yeah, non-magnified. My
Okay.
buddy Walt was spotting. He was spotting, but non-magnified, I was able to hit out to 600 meters or 600 yards. I can't remember, regardless, with my Bravo company training gun and just standard ball ammo and a micro T1, and it was an early one that had a 4-minute dot. And so if you've got a good zero, you can see at distance. Really, the only limitation is your ability to identify the target. In terms of shooting at distance, if you got a good zero, we routinely shot at Delta 300 and 400 meters with aim points, no problem at all. If you know where to hold, no issues at all. 300, depending on your zero, you'd hold on the head. At 400, you'd hold above it. Once you got that dialed in, you could absolutely get good hits. So there really isn't any real practical range limitations to a red dot on a carbine. I've shot it, long distance with it, relatively speaking, for a 5.56 rifle. It's really your ability to identify the target.
Okay.
That's the real limitation. It's not the limitation on the optic. Pistol, honestly, with like an acro, 3.5-minute dot, it really, as far as you can see, I mean, easily, if you have the ability, I mean, you can make shots to 200 meters with a pistol and an acro, no problem whatsoever. So there really isn't any practical pistol limitations within the realm of any reasonable distance that you would use a pistol. The acro is not going to be a disadvantage in any way. I would say it's absolutely an advantage over trying to somehow engage a target at distance with iron sights. So no limitations with an acro and a pistol at any extended pistol ranges at all. Actually, it's a plus.
Okay. All right. One more question. You're doing great.
Thank you.
Like you've done this before.
I think so.
Okay. Let's do maybe a little bit more of some history. When was the first red dot sight fielded by the military? And
Oh,
I
without,
think we kind of already touched on this, but I'm not sure what your
well,
answer is going to be.
actually, it's the single point sight in Vietnam with the Sante Raiders.
Okay.
Yeah. They,
Okay.
the single point sight, and I tell you, the most common place you'll see the single point sight is in the first Star Wars movies. You'll see the guys, they have like this sight on top. That's a
Uh-huh.
single point sight. It was made in Britain, of course. Star Wars movies came out of Britain. Were filmed in Britain or whatnot, British actors and whatnot. But they use a single point sight on top as like this laser device or whatever,
Ex
and it's a single point.
Explain single point sight. What do you mean?
What it is, it's an occluded view red dot sight, and you can't see through it. Okay, the Armson OEG would have been the one that would have been kind of the follow-on to that, kind of the second gen single point, so to speak. You can't see through the tube, so it requires you to have both eyes open. And the theory behind it is you bring it up, both eyes open, and kind of your stereo vision, for lack of a better term, blends the two sight pictures, what you see downrange with your target, and then the red dot, and then you make a shot. Here's the thing about it. Definitely inferior to what we're doing today with an Aimpoint, dramatically inferior. Also, it's something that has to be done quick. It's for like snap shooting. It was a hunting optic back in the day. It was a hunting optic aid for shooting fast against at game. Here's what'll happen, because I've had this happen to me. If you come up and you use that stereo vision, after a while that dot will start wandering on you, because your eyes are not designed to try to blend those two pictures in your mind's eye for very long. So if it's one of those
Hmm.
things where you go, I'm going to use this and make a real precise shot, or try to shoot a group at distance, it's going to work against you. It's meant for fast shooting, snap shooting. That was the first red dot sight. Here's the thing.
Was it the
Sante,
first one that the military used?
yeah, now it wasn't the first one that was officially adopted. That was Aimpoint.
Okay.
Aimpoint 68. It was the first one that was used on a limited scale for engagements at night, because the Sante raid was going to be done at night. And the Sante raiders, of course, at night, with the, Car 15 back in the day, M16, there were no night sights. So all you were doing at night was point shooting. There wasn't any lasers or anything like that. So you were just point shooting. So they searched through, I'm sure, the civilian market or wherever, and found this single point sight, which allowed them much greater hits at night.
Hmm.
So that was the first time it was used. It was the Sante raid. Now, interestingly enough, in classic military fashion, it went away. Right? It was a single. They used it for that, and then after that, instead of somebody going, you know what, we might want to think about mounting this field and moving forward. Well, after Vietnam, everything's went sideways. Post-Vietnam military, just things. It went away. So when things were revisited, as you fast forward to Delta Force in the 80s with the Aimpoint 1000, the Aimpoint 2000. We had some earlier Aimpoints guys were used, but the one that saw the most widespread use when I was there initially was the Aimpoint 2000. That's really the genesis for the Aimpoint we see now in the U.S. military today, and in military forces, really kind of around the globe. Was when Delta was using the Aimpoint 2000, and the one that first popped up on the radar. Now, Delta had been using it for a fair amount prior to that, was in Desert Storm, when there was Delta guys, Delta operators doing, bodyguard detail for Schwarzkopf over in the Middle East, and they had Aimpoint 2000s on their carbines. That was when everybody kind of, whoa, what's that? What's going on here? And then that was what led things to where we're at today. So the first technical use of a red dot sight was the Sante Raiders.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then that basically went away. It was the single point sight, basically went away. And then after that was the Aimpoint 2000 with Delta Force. And you're talking 1980s into 1990s. And then that started the trend that we see today, where the red dot sight, particularly the Aimpoint, is the gold standard for red dot sights for military use.
Okay. And you mentioned the M68. That was the old comp, just the
Yep.
comp M, right? There was no
Yeah, it was.
number.
It was a Comp M. Basically,
Okay.
the Aimpoint 5000, right, which was a 30 millimeter tube of full
Mm-hmm.
length. Well, then they chopped that down and made a more compact competition sight called the Aimpoint. I think they might even call it the Aimpoint XD at one time or whatever, Extreme Duty, but it was a comp M. And then
Okay.
that was tested by the military. The unit was using them, and one thing led to another, and it became the M68.
Hmm.
That was a pretty big watershed moment in for the military and Aimpoint when they hit that comp M envelope. That's the one when that is really the one that kind of opened the gates in the military, and I mean the rest is history.
Okay. Well, great.
Now,
Thanks,
let me just
Larry.
say
Yeah.
this before we close out.
Mm-hmm.
The Aimpoint stuff now is the best they've ever made. The micros, the Comp M4, Comp M5, I mean, they're the best they've ever made. The best red dot sights the world's ever seen. Tell you that older stuff, Aimpoint 2000, Aimpoint 5000, Aimpoint, the Comp M, they're still good pieces of kit. Don't go, well, I don't have the latest and greatest. And no. Those are still good pieces of kit. I mean, the Aimpoint 2000, I mean, it's a good piece of kit. You need to know how to use it. Obviously, it takes a readily accessible battery. But man, we didn't have much problem with them back in the day at all. And the only time we really had an issue with those older ones was if somebody lost the cap that covered the elevation and windage adjustments. And then what happened was that's what was the primary seal on the Aimpoint 2000 to keep out moisture. Well, if they lost the cap, now they had an avenue for moisture to get in, and over time, moisture would get inside the optic. Now, I mean, it would be foggy. You could still use it. The dot would still be there. There would just be a little bit foggy in the middle, but you could still actually use the optic. But as time went on, Aimpoint fixed that, so whether the caps are lost or not, that it's waterproof. But that was the only real issue with an Aimpoint 2000. And to be honest with you, the optics was still usable. And
Those
those old
optics
pieces
are
of kit, yeah, those old pieces of kit are still usable. Don't like throw it in the trash or something. I got to get a new one. No. And Aimpoint makes good stuff, and their stuff they made good stuff back in the day as well.
awesome. I know that those old pieces of kit, people ask us for, if they can get their hands on them for clone guns too. And
Oh yeah,
so if you
yeah,
got one, hold on to it.
yeah, clone guns big time. Best place I
Yeah.
would say would be to look at Gunbroker, and then probably eBay. A lot of people, you can't get a lot of gun stuff on eBay. You know what I mean? But you can
Mhm.
find some stuff on there. So I would say watch Gunbroker and eBay for when that stuff pops up. But at clone guns, absolutely. Guys cloning some of my guns that I've shown, on my videos and whatnot, and then that makes the Aimpoint 2000 hard to get. Same
Yeah.
thing with that single point sight, the Sante Raiders. Because
Mm.
what happens is there's guys cloning the Sante Raider Car 15. There's also a much bigger market of people doing the cosplay or costume play, whatever of Star Wars. So they scarf up those single point sights for their Star Wars clone guns. That's the bigger issue. If you're trying to find a single point sight for your Sante Raider clone, that's a tough one to get because of all the Star Wars fans.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think you kind of made a closing statement. Do you have anything else you want to say?
Yeah, I would just want to say how proud I am and how honored I am to be involved with Aimpoint over the years. I consider you guys personal friends, and for you guys, for us to work together to bring out that Vickers Tactical Micro T2,
Mm.
which I believe some are still available. Is that right?
I believe so. Yep.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
with the
Tell what that is. It's a limited
okay.
edition.
Andrea came to me a while ago and said, "Hey, we're thinking about would you be interested in bringing out an Aimpoint with your logo on it and a special serial number, and we would mark it as the Vickers Tactical Limited Edition Micro T2 with a mount?" And I was like, "Absolutely, I would be interested in that." So this is the first time we've ever done any kind of a collaboration outside of Aimpoint. And when anybody in the firearms industry, and I go, "Oh yeah, absolutely, I would be deeply honored to do that." So it took a little while to put it together, bounced some ideas around, came up with a Scalar Works mount, which is a mount I've been using now for a long time. Really, really high quality mount. Basically set up to be bolted right on your carbine right out of the box. Micro T2 has my logo on it. and an LAV limited edition number. Still has the factory serial number, but it has an LAV limited edition number. And there's only 250 of them right now. Now, keeping options open for doing some different ones maybe down the road. But I would tell you, if you want one, you need to jump on it. If you need to jump on it, you don't want to be one of those people and go, man, I wish I would have bought one of those when they're available. I would jump on it now. Like we talked about, when you compare the price of the optic with the mount, I mean, it's a solid value. I mean, it's not overpriced for what it is. The mount, and when you mount optic combo that's kind of where you're at price wise, regardless. So if you want a special piece of kit, if you're a fan of me or my channel, fan of Aimpoint, it's a good piece of kit to get. Very deeply honored to be involved with, very much so. And by the way, only available at aimpoint.us. That's the only place you can get it, correct? Is that right, Brittany?
Yep. I'm impressed you know all this, Larry.
Yeah. So Aimpoint, and I'm bringing this up because I know over the holidays, we launched it in November, and I know over the holidays, you guys sold quite a few.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how many's left, but you sold a good chunk of them. So I would tell people, if you want one, don't hesitate. Don't hesitate at all. I would jump on it because they probably in the near future, they're going to be sold out.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Larry. We appreciate you. We appreciate all you've done for us and for the country, and just keep rocking it. Thanks for doing this.
Do so.
Yeah, thanks for doing this interview too. While you're on the road.
Anytime.
Okay, guys. Well, we have had Larry Vickers, and this was part of Virtual SHOT Show 2021. Stay tuned for some more questions and answers.
All right.
And
have a good one, gang.
Make sure you're following Larry too. Okay.
Thank you.
Vickers Tactical on Instagram, right? And
yeah, Vickers Tactical YouTube. I mean, all you had to do is punch in Larry Vickers or Vickers Tactical online and all that stuff. You're going to get bombarded with stuff. So you'll have plenty of places to go on my social media or my YouTube or Vickers Guide for the books. You'll have plenty of stuff to find. Yeah, you'll have a Vickers tsunami when you open up when you punch in Google Vickers or Vickers Tactical. So I appreciate the support of everyone. Appreciate all the support of all my fans, supporters, subscribers to my channel, Aimpoint, everybody in the industry. Very, very fortunate, and I appreciate everybody who's made me a success. And I'm going to continue to give back and continue driving on.
Great. Thanks, Larry.
You got it. Take care.